Well, hello, Heidi. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz. I'm really happy to be here too.
Yeah, when I saw your book coming down the pike, it's going to be released in April. I knew I had to get you on the show because obviously the title, The Mother Act, is too perfect. But also, there's so many great themes within this book, and I want to get all into that today. But before we get started, would you mind giving us a bird's eye view of the events in your life that led you to working in the arts, being a writer, and then also specifically the creation of this book?
Absolutely. I wanted to be a writer since the time I was a child. I was 8 years old when I told my mom I'm going to be a writer. I loved reading novels, and that immersing in a fictitious world was the best thing to me, and that was always what I wanted to do. And what I worked toward my entire, as a child, as a teenager, in my 20s, I was doing it. Um, and I also came from a background where motherhood was very much the thing that a woman was supposed to do with her life. And so I was hesitant about that because my own mother and a lot of the women around me were, their lives were mothers, being mothers. And I didn't know how I would balance that with the other goals that I had for my own life. And so when I did become a mother, it was with a lot of fear, actually, that I would lose some essential parts of myself, lose the time and solitude and creative space and thinking space that had always been so important to me. And then, but I did make the conscious decision to go forward into it. But it was not easy. And so because I had thought so much about it beforehand and then had these early mothering experiences that I think are not uncommon, just in terms of feeling overwhelmed and under-supported, and a loss of identity. Suddenly,
Mm.
all of the things that made you who you were, maybe you don't have time for them, they're not the focus anymore, and it's all about this other small being that's in your life and needs you for everything. And so the Mother Act came out of that experience in early motherhood. A specific moment when the idea came to me was when I was alone with actually a toddler and a baby. My husband was away for 7 weeks. He's an actor. He was away
Mm.
acting, earning our income. It was
Right.
his work, and we needed it. And I just felt very alienated from myself, my own identity, my creative purpose, my intellectual life, and it really felt in that one moment that taking on the the enormous task of nurturing small human beings into their lives had required the sacrifice of my own life and my own purpose. And I felt that I could understand women who decide that the sacrifice is too much and they can't do it, and they leave, essentially. And so that was the imaginative leap for me into feeling like I get why a woman would choose to walk away, because this is too much. It's asking too much.
Mhm.
And so my immediate next thought was, but what would that do to my daughters? And I can't live with that fallout. And but maybe I could do it in fiction, and that was where it was born. But from the beginning, I wanted to be exploring both sides: the mother's experience and the experience of the daughter who is abandoned, essentially, and all just, yes, all of the fallout of that. Um, but it came very much out of my own early struggles in being a young mother.
Yeah. Did even having the spark of this idea that came to you like that, was it almost like a rope that you could hang on to? Like, oh, okay, I don't have to actually do it, but I can write about it. Was it just like a little relief in that moment? Like, oh, okay, I can hold on to this.
A little bit. I think that's not uncommon for artists of all types, but I think for anyone, we experience lives through whether it's watching a movie or a TV show or, about something you would never do or a person you would never be, but it's cathartic in that way that it
Mm,
allows you to have that sort of outlet valve to let that out. So yes, I would say yes.
yeah. Did you bring it to your husband? Like, okay, I have this idea for a book, and the husband in the book is not necessarily very helpful. She's kind of shouldering all of this on her own. Was he like, okay, great? Or was he like, can you make him a little less hated? What did
Well,
he have to say?
the interesting part, and this is now years ago, my daughters
Mm,
are now teenagers, and they were
wow.
little when the idea first came to me. I didn't start working on it immediately, but I was ruminating on it for a long time. Um, and I was in at that point in my life, I wasn't being fully honest with my husband about resentments around feeling that I was shouldering more of the load and jealousy that he was the one who got to go off and
Yep.
do his work and still be himself in the world in a way that felt lost to me. And so I was doing a lot of self-silencing at that point in my life and pouring it into the book. So
Mm,
he did not entirely know. And we've since had those conversations. I think there are so many factors at play, some of which are systemic in the way that girls and women are still raised, socialized, conditioned toward being the nurturer, and the mother figure is still elevated as the one who really matters. I was carrying a lot of that conditioning despite my own work on myself and considering myself a feminist. As soon as we had children, it was like in my cells, like I am
yeah.
the most important one who must give all. And if I don't, my children will suffer. And the father is not good enough.
Hmm.
So meanwhile, he's feeling sidelined and pushed out of the experience. And I'm feeling alone in the experience. So the first time I handed him the manuscript to read, which is dedicated to him,
No.
um, I was very nervous because it was like, not only have I taken a whole lot from your life and work and creative process and things that I know only because of my relationship with you, namely
Mm.
the theater life. Um, but I've put all those things I wasn't telling you in an early parenting experience, and
Yeah.
I put them into this story instead. So that's a very long answer to your question, but
No, it's
just
great.
just to say that yes, it was hard to give it to him to read. He read it again recently, and it generated a lot of conversations between us. I was very nervous, just I couldn't be in the same room when he was reading,
No.
and yet he loves it. And I don't see Damien, the father character, as negative or bad, but I think he's a product of his time and his own gender conditioning, and maybe a certain degree of obliviousness around
Hmm.
like just all of the tiny day-to-day mundane, frankly quite boring stuff that needs to go into keeping a small child alive.
Yeah.
um,
I think
yeah.
that was one of the things we were talking about before is like, even if you're not a woman who's in the creative arts, it doesn't matter. Like the themes translate to every woman who's had a child, and it is completely like, I don't know, it's kind of like you're turned upside down or you're thrown into the washing machine and you're kind of trying to find what's up and what's down. Why do you think mothers, it doesn't matter what generation you're in, why do you think we're all woefully unprepared for the reality of motherhood, what it really does take from you? And is there a way that we can be more prepared, at least mentally, physically, emotionally, so that when it does happen, we can ride out the storm and we don't have to really, I don't know, have everything crumbling down and build ourselves back up?
I think there's a lot more honesty happening now, or like a real talk about what it's actually like, especially in the early years as a mother. There's this term mom rage that people are
Mhm.
owning. which at the time that my children were small, which was 2009, 2010, I didn't feel that I could say any of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I gave it to this character to say, but I wasn't saying it myself. I was silencing myself. Um, and so I think it just honest conversation goes a long way toward people feeling affirmed and understood. And if you are not a mother and are thinking about it, or it's on the horizon, you are more equipped for it, I hope. But there's also an element of not being able to enter into that experience until you are in the bowels of it. And there's also a lot of maybe false positivity and mythology around mothers. Um, when you think of just the a mother's love and
Mm,
the Mother's Day cards that are just so over the top around this woman as the sacrificial, beautiful figure. Um, and so I don't think that helps to
yeah.
have it on a pedestal that way. It's this combination of motherhood and mothers are pedestalized and at the same time under supported and undervalued. Like if you think of a mother struggling like with a stroller on a bus or the subway or entering into a store and she's got like a baby crying and a toddler whining and like we're not helping her. We're like, oh,
Right.
she's bringing her noise and mess and chaos into our space. And that same person who might feel so beleaguered is also on a pedestal of you're doing the most important job in the world and
Mm-hmm.
you're a saint. And um, I think that's not helpful.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I literally, and she doesn't listen to the show, I don't think, but I was sitting down and I watched my neighbor out my window and she's carrying her crying baby and the driveway's really steep and she's trying to load him in the car and get to work and the bottle of milk falls and rolls down this very long driveway and I'm just looking and I'm like, oh, you sweet thing. But nowhere in my mind am I like, I'm gonna jump out my door and go and help her. So I think you're so right. It's like we see it, we understand it, but at the same time, when a woman is struggling, we don't, it's almost like we don't want to intervene. We don't want to step into their world. We just kind of see it and we're like, oh, well, that's rough. And it's
Yeah,
like, man, I don't know. I think we on some level miss those tribal type relationships that maybe were so natural to us for millennia.
that could be. I think it can be very different, has been different in the past, is different in some other cultures. Um, we are very isolated as nuclear families generally can be anyway.
Yeah. So how did you approach then this push and pull between, I love how you say between love and duty, especially if you're someone who, up until this point of having children, your life, your identity really has been your career and it's self-expression and, connecting to the world in a very unique way. How do you then switch that or make a choice, balance it, however you want to say, in a way that is healthy? And then how did you approach that when writing the book? Because obviously she did make a choice.
She did make a choice. And in the book, it's obviously an extreme choice. It's not one that very many women make, but some do. It happens. And I think maybe I've been thinking of this analogy of mothers who leave as kind of canaries in the coal mine around the expectations and the load in modern motherhood of and there every once in a while there's a woman who's like, this is killing me, I can't do it. Um, but most of us just absorb it and keep going.
Hmm.
So for myself, it took me a while to find anything approaching balance, and part of that is simply the kids getting older. It does
Yeah.
get better. Of course, there are wholly new kinds of challenges that come about with tweens and teens, but it's not so much in the daily just survival mode of
Yeah.
so partly it is it is time. For me also, because I was so afraid that I would never write again if I chose to become a mother, that I would never have time for myself again, that I never read a book again. Like I remember, I'm never going to read a book again. Like when I had,
Mm.
an infant, and I was like crying about that, which obviously is not true. But because I was driven a bit by this fear, when I did have time to write, when I was able to take myself away or get up early in the morning, I used that time. There was no
Mm.
more wasting time in the way there had been when I was relatively unfettered. Even if you have a job and other responsibilities, they are usually things that end at a certain time of the day, and parenting doesn't ever really. And so I was able to harness that fear to make sure that it didn't come true. And
Mm.
I became much more focused as a writer. I became much more, I was able to finish projects in ways that I had struggled to do. I had been a very slow writer. I became a faster writer. And that's I think one gift that motherhood gave to me. And so it kind of balanced itself out. I would say another thing that I did imperfectly, but have become much better in more recent years, is to be in partnership with my partner
Mm.
rather than this feeling that it has to be all on me, or mostly on me, or I'm the expert, and so if he does it, he will do it wrong. So
Mhm.
I just need to do it, right? Um, and and now he is very involved in doing actually more of the housework and cooking and carpooling than I am doing currently. And so it has evened out in terms of um, that division of labor. But I think those kinds of conversations are probably not conversations that most of us have heading into parenting. And because there's so much about the biology of it
Yeah.
that makes it so that the mother is really needed, actually, especially if you're breastfeeding, but even if you're not, your body is kind of a lot. Your body is all. And um, so I think conversations and openness around that help, but it might not be something that you really know to do until you're drowning.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so true though. I mean, it's so true. And I don't know. I think I read, I don't know, 10, 12 parenting books before giving birth. I felt like I was so prepared. I was going to rock it. Was working out all through pregnancy. And then, yeah, when it hits and the realness of it really hits you, I don't know if there's anything you can do to really prepare for that. And then you're not only dealing with yourself and all of your biological things going on, but then you're trying to work with your partner who is, an innocent person and just trying to do their best too. And it's just like, I don't know, there's just so many fascinating things that happen when you have a baby. And it's like there's this whole other world that no one really digs into until you have a book like this out there really talking about it. Were there any choices that you made for Sadie, the protagonist, that felt particularly cathartic for you, aside from, walking out the door? Obviously, you weren't going to do that, but like anything else that she said or that she did that you were like, oh, I wish I could have done that, or this feels good to write.
Loads, yes. Basically almost everything Sadie says or writes, because in the book, she has this one-woman show about motherhood called The Mother Act. And she also has a few think pieces that she writes that are in the book, and defenses of her choices that she writes. And all of that I felt at one
Mm.
time or another. And did not feel that I could speak. um, there's a line, I became a mother and discovered rage, which
Yeah.
actually my husband put on a mug for me, which was
Oh
something,
my
again, that people are
God.
talking about now. But they weren't then, or not in circles that I was in.
Mhm.
You were supposed to become a mother and discover love, which I also did.
Yeah.
But the rage was there too, not at my children so much as the system, society,
Mm-hmm.
biology, yeah,
The
and
situation.
the situation. So, so, so yes, putting all of those things into Sadie's mouth was cathartic. And I also have always believed that if I am feeling something and thinking something and struggling with something, I am not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
And if nobody is saying it and I have an opportunity to be the one to do that, albeit hiding behind a fictional character, um, someone is going, that is going to resonate with someone. Maybe
Oh,
not
yeah.
everyone, but there's a lot that Sadie says, even though I pushed her to extremes. She's a pretty brazen, out there person. But there's a lot that she says that I kind of think like she's got a point. She's got
Mm-hmm.
she's got a point.
Yeah. Did anything surprise you when you were writing it? Like you were, often when we journal, things come up and you're like, where did that come from? Did anything happen when you were writing this, either with Jude or Sadie?
Constantly. Yes. I mean, I went into it with the basic idea, the framework of it being a solo show, and it's the opening night of that show, and we zoom in on 6 different periods in their life together, in the relationship between Sadie and Jude. Half of them are from Sadie's perspective, half of them are from Jude's. So I had that from the beginning. That's what I knew. But what exactly was going to unfold, what was going to happen, I always knew Sadie would leave. And we know that right from the beginning, but we don't see it happen until the very end of the book. And there were surprises, like big and small, along the way, um, which I think is one of the wonderful parts of the creative process, that
Yeah.
you can't plan for it all, or outline meticulously in a way that's going to end up being what the book actually is. I mean, there are still things that I discovering about it. For example, um, one of the sections of the book is centered around a production of The Taming of the Shrew, which Sadie takes great offense to the play, the story, which is on the surface anyway about a man taming a woman. So she's, useful in society, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and I didn't really realize until well into revisions that in a way that's Sadie's story also. She starts out really bold and brazen in this controversial feminist figure who's saying the things you're not supposed to say. Um, and then she falls in love and she gets married, even though that's something she said she would never do. And then she has a child, even though that's something she said she would never do. And it's kind of a taming of the shrew,
Mm-hmm.
kind of plot line for her. Although she doesn't stay tamed for too long, but it does happen to her. And I think it happens for many of us, not just as women, as human beings. Like, we have to be able to make rational choices and live in society and all of that. But that was a surprise, that I didn't realize that I was doing that. I didn't do it deliberately.
Mm.
Just mirroring that Shakespeare play, not like directly, but just a little bit thematically.
Yeah, maybe it had been living inside of you, all these years and then finally had a way to come out. I love that.
Yeah.
How did you get into the mind of Jude, the daughter? Did your daughters get to weigh in at all? Did you go to them for any kind of advice, or was this all coming out of you?
It came out of me. They were still pretty little when I was creating that character. I inhabited Jude a lot by remembering my own self as a teenager. I was a shy, quiet, introverted, not to the extent that Jude is, but um, I pushed it further again. I leaned into that. Just, I was a kid who struggled to say what I was feeling or what I wanted to say, or to make my voice heard, and you know would write out a script beforehand if I had to make a phone call. And that Jude is,
Yeah.
Jude is like that. And her path is toward stepping into her own voice and stepping into visibility, and not hiding anymore. And she has lived in the shadow of this complicated mother of hers um, for her entire life. And so I very much, I love Jude. I embraced her, and neither character is me, but they have elements of me.
Hmm.
And my I now have a daughter who is 13, who's the age that Jude is when we first see her in the book, and she has read the book, and that was really special. She is nothing like Jude, but she was very immersed in the book, which is not meant for 13-year-old girls, but
Right.
she
But
was,
maybe.
she was, yeah, she was in it.
Yeah. It's so interesting now. I feel like I've been, I don't know, maybe targeted by the algorithm, but I've been seeing a lot more stories of mothers and daughters and the friction that can result from those relationships, those super, super complex relationships. Um, what do you really want women who, whether they're mothers or not, struggling with that element in their lives, what do you want them to get out of this book, if anything, besides just a really entertaining read?
I think the thing that's one of the things that's so complicated about mothers and daughters is that our mothers are our models of what is possible. There are examples. We might rebel against that, or we might want to emulate that, or it might be a little bit of both. Um, and my understanding of the mother-daughter relationship really went through a transition when I became a mother then of a daughter. And I'm aware that, oh, I'm now the one setting the example and inflicting potentially
Mm.
the unintended wounds and
Yeah.
the material of their future therapy sessions. I'm that person now, and so I guess it's about understanding it, and compassion and empathy for each other, for both sides, to know that like every mother is a daughter usually, whether or not they knew or had a relationship with their mother, biological or otherwise, and and a human being.
Mm.
When we are growing up and even into our early adulthood, I think we feel like our mothers are these figures who in relation to us, right?
Mhm.
They exist in relation to us, and actually they are full human beings in their own right, with their own pasts and struggles and traumas and desires and goals and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think, and this is certainly something that I love about fiction that has more than one point of view, is that you can enter into both sides of the relationship and know what it is to be that person, and then to be this other person who is in complete opposition to the first one. And they both, have really good points. They both
Hmm.
have valid experiences. Everybody, their experiences are both valid. And so I think I would love if people read this book and feel um, affirmed and seen and recognize themselves in some way, but also to complicate that sort of binary of, me versus the other person, or um, the two sides that can't meet in the middle. I really loved to complicate that kind of thinking, because I think it is more complex than that. We're all the protagonist of our own story, and our
Hmm.
actions and thoughts and desires make sense to us. Um, I think very few of us have set out to be a villain in our lives.
You're
And
right.
so, complicating that feels important to me, and also interesting, and hopefully entertaining too, as you say.
Oh, for sure. And it is, you have to do a little bit more work. You have to have more patience and more compassion and understanding. And it reminds me of that quote, you don't read, you live one life. You do read, you can live 1,000 lives. And that's exactly what you're doing here. You're encouraging the reader to get in the mind and the motivations of someone else. And then, you put the book down and you go out and you're like, huh, it's like it opens you up, I think. And that's hard, and it can be sad and frustrating, but at the same time, I think life is so much more beautiful when you do that, because it's like it's not all about you, and that's so constricting and limiting.
I think it is, yes, more beautiful and more complicated. It's and in a way, that is what the novel is about, because the characters are actors, and actors step into the skin of another person and have to understand what makes them tick. Um, and there's a point in the book where Jude is explaining her father's attitude toward Sadie, her mother, and he says, or she says something like, it's the actor in him, like he has empathy for both sides. He
Mhm.
can't pick a side because he can understand and inhabit both of us. Um, and so to her, it feels a bit like fence sitting, but it's about, I think, an experience of empathy, and which is ultimately what does happen. Not to bring in spoilers here, but between Sadie and
Heidi.
Jude, it's just that they're each asked to look at things from the other's side by inhabiting the other in some way, um, which yes, which I think is an important thing.
I just love that, this book all started because you were in a moment of frustration, or a season of frustration and hardship. And then it comes out in this really beautiful novel of mutual understanding and growth. And then once that's out in the world, it's going to heal somebody, multiple people, on so many levels. I mean, it's almost like, when we go through these really hard trials, beautiful, beautiful things can come of it if we agree that we're going to learn from it, or we agree that we're not going to shy away from it. I mean, what do you feel at the end of the day your purpose is, maybe with the book, with your life, with everything?
I think certainly with the book and with all of my writing, because I have um, other novels I'm working on as well. I am very interested in the experience of being a woman, and which sounds very broad, but just what we do with what we're given and what we yearn for, um, and and I think with this book in particular, because it is a mother-daughter story, um, I would like women especially, not that men can't read it. I think it's applicable for men as well, and but women especially to feel less alone in and more empowered in naming and owning their own desires and needs. If it's around motherhood, especially, whether they are a mother or considering becoming one or feeling pressured to become one, because there still is that, that pressure around, oh, you'll change your mind, or the clock is ticking,
Mhm.
or, when are you going to have kids? And so to feel empowered with whatever they know to be right for themselves. And maybe they don't know, maybe it's a question that's still being explored. Um, I would love if if this book help them to feel validated and empowered and expanded around all of those questions, which are really complicated. They're really
Yeah,
complicated, and there's no one answer for all of us. So I think it's important to acknowledge that.
absolutely. Oh, I love it. Okay. Oh my gosh, we are over time, but if there were one final message that you would want to leave with the listener, the woman tuning into this right now, what would that be?
Well, since this is a motherhood podcast, I think it would be that if you feel overwhelmed and ill-equipped and severely depleted by this mothering role, uh, it's not that there's something wrong with you personally. I think we go toward that. It's something wrong about me. Why can't I do this and everybody else can? Um, that is not that there's something wrong with you personally. It's that I think there's something wrong with the way motherhood is done culturally and the expectations that are heaped on it. Um, and so I think it's more systemic than personal. We need more support. We need more um, open conversations like this one.
Well, that's perfect, because that's exactly what we're doing. So Heidi, thank you so much for taking some time to speak to my audience today. Can you let us know where our listener can find you online, potentially work with you in some of your writing workshops, and get the book?
Yes. So my website is HeidiReimer.com. And there's also, I have a newsletter on Substack. You can find that through my website. I'm on Instagram imperfectly, but I am there. You can find me there. And I do also mentor and coach novelists who want to bring a novel into the world. So, but my website is sort of the one-stop shop online.
Perfect, perfect. And you guys know that's always in the show notes if you are driving around or running around town. Heidi, thank you so much for bringing this book into the world over the many years. Thank you for sharing your voice with us today and giving a voice to so many mothers all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz.